In this episode, we're fighting crime in a future time. That's right, we're talking cops action figures, so stick around. Hello friends, and welcome to Days of Dorker Past. My name is Rob, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite action figure lines from the 1980s, and that is Cops. Cops was made by Hasbro and released in 1988. It only yielded 2 waves between 88 and 89, but with those waves, we got 24 action figures, 9 vehicles, which 5 of those vehicles came with figures, and 1 season of a cartoon that ran for 65 episodes. Oh, and a comic book series. Can't forget that. We had a triple threat, a la like G.I. Joe. Unfortunately, it wasn't as popular. Cops was kind of like a spiritual successor to G.I. Joe in all ways, even down to the packaging having file cards written by Larry Hama himself. One of the things that made Cops action figures so great was you had the full range articulation of a G.I. Joe figure in a large, heavy-duty body. On top of that articulation, their bodies had great proportion. You had big characters like Big Boss and skinny characters like Dr. Bad Vibes. They ran the gamut of body sizes and musculature, and they were just great. To top off these great action figures, they all came with awesome accessories. And they all had a cap firing feature, either it be their backpack or their guns. Anyway, in this episode, I want to talk about 10 of my favorite figures that were just awesome figures, or they had great accessories. Oh, and let me point out, if you've noticed, I got a head wound. Something fell and hit me in the head, so if I mess up, that's my excuse. Anyway, let's look at the figures. Another cue that Cops kind of took from G.I. Joe, where G.I. Joe had a very fanciful and cartoon representation of the armed forces, Cops did that with law enforcement agencies and rescue services. Unfortunately, it came off as very stereotypical at times, but it was those big bombastic characters that made it awesome. Well, first on the list is Sundown, and as you can see, Sundown was a Texas Ranger, and as we go into the stereotypes, he looked like a cowboy. Now keep in mind that Cops took place in the future, a future with Blade Runner-esque large buildings and flying cars. Not as dark as Blade Runner, but you get the point. Anyway, Sundown was a Texas Ranger that joined the Cops force. Stereotypical from his hat to his chaps to his twin 6-shooters. But you know what? It was awesome. The twin 6-shooters were a great accessory, and his cap firing feature was his red backpack, which you have him hold the guns and you would pull the backpack, psh, 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 which would simulate him blasting away at the crooks. Sundown was a great figure in its simplicity of, yes, he's a cowboy going after the robbers. That's just awesome. Number 2 was the leader of Cops, and that's Bulletproof. I'm going to get it out of the way. His real name was Baldwin P. Vess. Bulletproof Vess. Get it? Anyway, what his shtick was, what made the figure great, he came with a cloth trench coat. He came with a very big cap-firing gun, and he had a briefcase with a handcuff attachment to it. He kind of represented probably more of like an FBI agent. Anyway, underneath his trench coat, he had a cybernetic metal torso. The figure ended about right here. It had a dress shirt with tie. And below that was a steel-painted cybernetic torso. So now you see where the bulletproof vest aspect comes in. He was a great character in the cartoons. It's a great, solid toy. Number 3 was a character that I talked about in my Ninjas in Cartoons episode, and that is Nightstick. Nightstick was your prerequisite ninja of the team. He came with a cat-blasting, double-ended, like, naginata kind of polearm thing. He came with a very cool, like, SWAT helmet that was reminiscent of, like, a samurai's helmet. And he came with a variety of ninja weapons, like katana, and kind of like a wakizashi, but with a handcuff attachment at the end. Man, that's pretty cool. That's innovative. But it's just a very neat character. And it reminded me a lot of Quick Kick, because he had a sash with shuriken on it. And let's be fair, the Cops line did borrow a lot from G.I. Joe, as we've already talked about. But they went as far as to borrow names and some slight likenesses of characters. But it kind of went both ways, because after the Cops line folded, some of the Cops names were reused for later G.I. Joe characters. So it's kind of like a big circle. You could kind of say that Cops were G.I. Joe in the future, maybe? It would have been kind of cool to have like a neat time travel aspect where they met each other. That would have been neat. Anyway, number 4 on the list is the Crook Hyena. Hyena was kind of portrayed as a cross between Joker and Riddler. He used prank type of gadgets to rob stores and take hostages and the like. The one thing I sympathize with him for is that he's a bald dude that wears a mask with long flowing blonde locks. I mean, if you're going to be a criminal and be a lie and cheat, why not wear a wig? I mean, it's innuendo. People won't know who you are. But on top of that, it just looks cool. His mask was a great selling point for the figure. But he had great colors. He was very, yes, I'll be the first to say I don't like the Dayglow G.I. Joe. But this guy had Dayglow. His cap firing feature was a pink gun, but on the back of the cap firing part, it had this gnarly, like, spiked knuckle thing. That just looked bad. That looked like that could mess somebody up. He also came with knives, a pistol, and I need to back up for a second. The pink thing he came with wasn't a gun, it was called the Skull Crasher. So I assume he just bashed people over the head with it. That's awesome. That's a good sign of a crook. Number 5 on the list is one of my personal favorites, and that is Officer Bowser and Blitz. Okay, let's get it out of the way. Bowser and Blitz would be like Mutt and Junkyard, but if Junkyard was a robot. This figure, let's start with him, was awesome because he had a red flashing light on his back. It didn't light up, but it was reflective that when you spun this little thing under him, it would catch the light and kind of look like it was a flashing light. So you take that with an articulated jaw that he could grab onto people and a place that you could put Bowser's huge cap firing gun on his side. You could have had a figure right there, but then you added Officer Bowser, who is a great canine unit person with large pads and a great little brown handgun. This was a great combo. And it's like you got 2 figures in one. Like I said, one of my personal favorites, he was one that I actually had, and I adored it. Number 6 on the list, as we're talking about getting 2 for 1, Dr. Bad Vibes. Dr. Bad Vibes was your typical mad scientist of the crooks. First, a great feature was that he had a clear plastic dome on top of his head that you could actually see his brain. I mean, that's awesome for an action figure. It's kind of gross, kind of creepy, but super awesome. He came with a big cap-firing gun, but what made him even more awesome was that he came with his robotic sidekick, Buzz Bomb. Now, Buzz Bomb, a great little robot, also with a clear dome for its head, and he had saw blade arm attachments. I mean, you had two figures with that. So he didn't come with a lot of accessories, but he came with a big little robot dude with movable buzzsaw arms. That's just awesome. I mean, I still wish I had mine because, I mean, the clear dome, that's kind of a rarity. I mean, to have a brain exposed on an action figure, that's awesome. Number 7 on the list is the Crook Bullet. Bullet was the munitions arms dealer crook. What made him super awesome, on top of having a bullet-shaped helmet that you could take on and off, was that he came with this like Segway thing that he could go on that had movable wheels and a cap-firing Gatling gun on it. Now, just imagine that. A Segway with a Gatling gun on it. That's really weird, but pretty cool. He also came with a ton of pistols and guns. I mean, he's an arms dealer. It makes sense. He had very muted browns and earthy tones, which kind of went against a lot of the bright and day-glow color schemes of these characters. That made him kind of stand out. But, again, with, like, Bowser and Blitz and Dr. Bad Vibes, that little vehicle he came with, I mean, that's a great selling point. Number 8 on the list is the firefighter of the cops team, Inferno. Inferno first came with a removable helmet, which a lot of the cops figures did, and I'm always a mark for removable helmets. From G.I. Joe to Masters of the Universe, the few that they had, and cops. I mean, stuff like that is an instant sell for me. But anyway, his helmet was this cool, futuristic fireman's helmet that kind of harkened back to really old fireman helmets. But anyway, helmet aside, he came with this huge cap-firing fire axe. I mean, I know he's a fireman. Can you imagine being a crook and a dude's coming at you with a huge fire axe? I mean, he also came with a little pistol, which I don't think is regulation for firemen, but really, are we gonna, I mean, it's fine. Anyway, it's a great figure. Again, it's a stereotype of a fireman's uniform, made very fanciful, very cool. That fire axe, I mean, it was as big as he was. It attached with hoses to his backpack, which, again, awesome. Great accessories, great figure. Number 9 on the list is Apes. And what Apes stands for is Automated Police Enforcement Systems. And that's all just fancy talk for Stiltman, if you're familiar with the Marvel character. What Apes was, he had an armored exosuit, if you will, that allowed him to extend in height and reach. I guess it's to help get cats out of trees or something. I don't know. But anyway, it's just a really neat armor system that would snap onto the figure. And the hands were kind of clawed and creepy, so that's always cool. He came with a big cap-firing gun, like most of the characters, but the exoskeleton is what really made him stand out. He had a very basic blue and white costume with a white helmet, but it worked. It very simplistic, but very cool. Anyway, Apes. What a weird name. Number 10 on the list is my absolute favorite crook in the entire Cops line. but honestly, it's my favorite Cops figure of all of them, and that is Buttons McBoom Boom. Buttons McBoom Boom was your stereotypical gangster. He came in a purple pinstripe suit, a cap-firing Tommy gun that could be kept in a very large cello case. That's pretty neat. He had a removable hat, but the biggest selling point, and also what made him awesome in the cartoon, his chest flipped down and guns would come up. They didn't automatically spring up. You had to bring them up, and they were kind of weird looking. In the cartoon, they're just large barreled machine guns that come up out of his chest. The toy version, they were kind of weird looking, kind of spindly, yeah. But through the power of your imagination, it didn't matter. He was still Buttons McBoom Boom, one of the coolest villains on the show. This was one that I had, and man, I still wish I had it. I hate to admit what happened to my Cops figures, but one of the weird things looking at this, 1988 to 89, that kind of takes me aback a little bit because I would have been 12 and 13. Yet my recollection of these was I was a little kid, but I wasn't. I mean, I was heading into high school, and unfortunately that was the downfall of my figures. I wish I could say that I donated them to worthy children and they had fun with them, but no. Unfortunately at that time was my Red Ryder era, my BB gun era, and unfortunately my Cops figures suffered that destructive teenager streak that I went through. I totally regret it, I totally feel bad about it, and I mean, I'm paying for it now because I really, really wish I still had them. Like I said, they were great figures, great articulation, great designs, and they were just like a bigger version of G.I. Joe. I mean, everything from the motifs, the colors, the accessories, I mean, they're awesome, and I truly miss them. Hopefully one day I'll be able to stumble upon them at a reasonable price. Who knows? But live and learn. Since then, I've not destroyed an action figure, and I still regret those decisions that I made when I was 13. Anyway, that was just a quick look at 10 of my favorite Cops figures and crooks from 1988 and 1989. Like I said, they were made by Hasbro. They fit right within the G.I. Joe universe to the point that the file cards were written by Larry Hama himself. I mean, that's awesome. I say that word a lot. I apologize. Anyway, if you like this episode, please leave a like. If you got something to say, leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new and you stumbled upon this and you like this or any of the episodes that it's recommending below here, hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell, you'll be notified whenever there's a new episode. But anyway, until next time, keep being rad and stay dorky.